Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. Today, Sona and I will be breaking down the sixth, sixth episode. I actually now have to look it up. The sixth episode of season one of The Agency on Showtime / Paramount Plus. Spy for Sale. When I hear Spy for Sale, I think about when I used to read Caps for Sale. Did you ever read that book to your
I
to your son?
think we own it, but I don't have a distinct recollection of reading it.
Oh, you would. You would have said the words "cap for sale" many, many times over the course of reading that book. But
That's funny because we do have one called Millions of Cats that, for whatever reason, became his favorite during lockdown. So I read Millions of Cats millions
millions
of
of times.
times.
Exactly.
And, you develop your own little intonations that you
Hmm.
do and whatever. And so now I always have this distinct memory of going, millions of cats. So I kind of get what you're saying.
That's exactly what we used to do. It used to be like, I used to call out to her when she was little, be like, "Caps for sale, caps for sale." And he's an Italian guy, so sometimes I do like an Italian accent. So when I saw Spy for Sale, I guess immediately Spy for Sale. How was your Christmas? What was your son's favorite present that he received? Was there anything that was at the top of his list for Santa?
After a few years of having some very big ticket items on his list, like a Nintendo Switch, for example,
Mhm.
this year I really had to pester him to make a list. I guess he's the kid who has everything. It was a few smaller items, but I think the things he was most excited about were a kind of set up to do different colored lighting in his room, an LED lighting strip
Yes.
kind of thing,
Yeah.
and Madden 25
Oh, wow. Nice.
for the PS5 gaming system that was the previous Christmas gift.
That's a pretty nice one, actually. So,
That was ridiculously expensive, actually. The only thing that made it okay for me to spend this type of money on a child this age is that many of our friends assured us that these would be like paying off for years to come,
yeah.
basically. And I will say the Nintendo Switch has been worth its weight in gold in airport waiting time and
Yeah.
doctor's office waiting time.
Yeah. They
So
always have something to do.
yeah, it's really paid off in a way that I didn't think it would. And actually, a friend of ours, or one of our mutual friends, told us that she had bought her son a Switch at about this age and he had just taken it to college with him. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, hey, if it works that way, then fine.
My younger nephew, he was a little older when he got it than your son, but he still plays with it now. It's still his preferred gaming system. So when we went to Europe last year together, he attached it to, has the docking station attached to the television in
Mm-hmm.
the living room when we were in Seville, actually. Basically, he would play all night. He could take it with him when he wanted to, but my daughter would hang out with him and they would play together on the TV. So it was just incredibly useful thing to have.
Yeah, my husband and my son were playing together last night, and it's actually sweet in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Given that price seems like a bargain compared to the PS5. That
Yes.
is
Mm-hmm.
out of control. So hopefully that is going to pay off as well, even though my personal feelings about football, and I don't personally love the idea that he wanted Madden 25, but it could be worse in the age of, I mean, he tried to put Call of Duty on his list, and I had to explain to him that that was not happening.
Does not happen.
So I'll take Madden 25 over Call of Duty.
Over Call of Duty, exactly. My daughter's favorite present was her Cosmo watch. It's like a kid's watch that we got for her
Cute.
because we don't want to get her a phone. So
Same.
it has GPS on it. You get notifications when she arrives home, for example. She wants to start walking home from school by herself. She can make phone calls on it. We control from the app. We can control what contacts go in there. She has some games on there, but just like puzzle games. I put Spotify on there. She doesn't listen to that much music, and now I put Spotify on her watch, and it's like a kid's Spotify that you can put on there.
Mm-hmm.
So it has, filtered, but it also has audiobooks and other things they can listen to. And now she listens to music and audiobooks all the time. So I'm like, all right, good. She's getting into stuff that, maybe it's an excuse for her a little gateway to get into things. And it has some pretty limited apps that you can install on there. It's not like the Apple Watch. But anyway, it's what she wanted. Her friends have it too. So now she gets to talk to them.
And is that connected to your cell phone service?
You have to buy cell phone service through the watch company. I think they use T-Mobile. I think it's not very expensive. It's pretty cheap phone service. considering, I guess, pretty limited. Yeah, she was ice skating yesterday, for example, and she was calling me and leaving me voice memos and calling me
Cute.
and texting me the whole time and sending me pictures. So it's cute.
Cute.
And we'll feel a little more comfortable if she's she only the school will make it sound like the school's like miles away. She's gonna walk home. It's only like
No,
a
I
quarter.
know how close the school
Of course, you
is.
know how close it is.
Yeah.
But just feels comfortable to know that she'll have the watch available to reach out to us if she needs to.
Yeah, we're struggling with that because of soccer practice being fairly far from
Right.
our apartment, and our son has started taking the team bus to practice, which is great. But we do want to have some sort of GPS system, which currently is an Apple AirTag, which is not
Yeah.
perfect, but okay. But I would like to have something a little bit better.
She wanted to get a watch that matched her friends' watches. If I would have done it myself, I personally would have bought it for only slightly more money, the SE, the light version of the Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
When you set it up, we've done this for her iPad as well. You can create a child account and say, I'm at the parent. And then it gives you similar controls where you can, for example, with this child's watch, and it's very convenient because the parent portal is very simple. The Apple Watch is definitely more complicated, but you can do the same type of thing where you have like geofencing, where like when she's at school or certain hours of the day, she can't play any of the games on it and things like that. But it's the same thing where you have, you control the contact list of calls she can receive and make. And I would just say that the user experience for the Apple Watch is a little more robust, to say the least. But
yeah, I'm actually not looking for any user experience, which is part of the problem.
Well, that might be, then you may want to go with this because it is incredibly simple. Like it is like so basic. You just add the contacts, you set the time.
We were thinking actually, this is not going to resolve the GPS problem, but just maybe getting a flip phone so that if there's an emergency, he can just call us or text us. But other than that, just kind of getting by with the AirTag. I'm not sure. It's hard. You can't win no matter what you do, I think.
Her best friend who has this watch as well leaves it behind all the time. And by the way, she has friends in her class that have actual iPhones.
Yeah.
And they're on them constantly.
Right.
But if they come for a play date, they always lose their phones. And then an hour later, the mom comes back and it's like, oh, can we find the phone? And it's somewhere in the middle of the backyard or something. So all that is to say that I don't think that the flip phone is a good idea because that's going to get lost probably the first day he has it. But at least the watch is on the body.
Yeah, the idea of the flip phone would be actually that it just lives in the soccer backpack.
Yes, good point.
And is only for an actual emergency situation. More like the bus left without me. Can you come get me from this remote soccer field?
God forbid, right?
Yeah, it's a little scary as a parent. I try and really reinforce, don't forget, you're taking the bus home. And then when I see him get on the bus, they say he's getting off at 37th Street when he comes home. So try and, checks and balances. But, you hear these horror stories, right? About kids getting left behind places.
True. Speaking of someone being left behind places, let's talk about Coyote.
Let's.
The Spy for Sale. I was trying to look for a good segue there. I watched this episode late because I was busy because of the holidays and had people over the house, etc. So on my news feed, just because I am constantly Googling about this show, probably about this jacket the past week or so, because the jacket's got a little viral.
Has it become like an obsession? Sometimes there's an item of clothing or a handbag that I just become so preoccupied with that I just spend way too much time trying to track it down.
You know what? I don't know if it is my perception of it that it has become an obsession, because first of all, I now have seen it on my newsfeed where people are talking about Fassbender. I got an article in my newsfeed, by the way, that apparently Fassbender himself is like a fashion icon. And there are websites where it's like, here's the jacket he wore in The Killer. Here's the hat he wore in The Killer, right? Like, so apparently he's got a whole category on these websites, which I was not aware of until now. There's a whole thing around Fassbender. So it could be the Fassbender thing. It could be this show, or it could simply be my warped view of it, because multiple listeners have sent me screenshots of different websites where you can buy the jacket.
Hysterical.
And on every one of those websites that I've been sent, by the way, the jacket's going for like $99. I think the one I sent you, the link that I forwarded to you, was like $129. So
yes,
I think these are knockoffs, but anyway. Yeah, something's been going on with this jacket. But that wasn't the thing I
Funny.
was going to mention about it, was that because I've probably been Googling too much or clicking too many links about this, my Google feed has agency stuff in it. I guess this is just everyone's personal opinion of what they're seeing. All of the articles in my entertainment subcategory in Google was about the agency, and it was all reviews for this episode of the show from professional critics. And it's just like, this show is just so boring. And like, it was just this very negative take that an episode where absolutely nothing happens. So I was waiting for this to be literally one of those episodes where everybody spins their wheels and nothing that we saw previously is going to come to any kind of fruition. I want to get your opinion of this, Sona, because this was the most suspenseful episode of the season for me. I had the exact opposite opinion that the general critical consensus seemed to be. What did you think of this episode?
I think it was largely a quiet episode, but I felt like there was a lot that happened in it. And there were definitely stressful points. And as I briefly mentioned to you before we started recording, there were definitely points where I was confused.
Yes.
So I did have to rewind and rewatch. So I guess maybe if you just kind of brushed it off as like, that was confusing, and kept watching, maybe you would find it boring. I did not, I have to say.
I didn't find it boring because I thought that there was a lot of things that were clarified here. There is some things that are just confusing logistically, and we'll get into them when we break down the episode, because I do have, I think, probably the same questions you have, or maybe not questions, but just confusion around certain things, because I think they're not mysteries. They're just confusing in the way they were presented.
Yes.
But I thought that the ending, as all these threads are coming together and really the stakes could not be any higher, and from a psychological perspective, the strain on the Martian character, it was palpable to me. Like, I found it very suspenseful that everybody he theoretically is trying to protect is in danger now. The mission itself is in danger now, and the stakes are so high. I wasn't bored at all. Maybe earlier in the episode, I felt like they were just kind of connecting dots and moving things forward. But I thought the last 15 minutes of this short episode, by the way, this is the shortest episode they've had so far. The last 15, 20 minutes of this episode were very suspenseful.
I thought a lot happened. And yeah, there were definitely stressful points as well. There were things that were explained. There were things that were set in motion. So I don't have any complaints about this episode.
Yeah, I thought this was one of my favorites despite some of the weaknesses there as well. This was also once again directed by that director we called out last week, Zetna Fuentes. And I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I also, again, thought this was really a nice, stylish episode, not as flashy as some of those early ones. Really, I was, again, very impressed with its style. All right, we pick up immediately from the end of last week's episode. Of course, we made a discovery about the calendar appointment with the location, the lockbox. We find the lockbox, and seems to be empty, but actually there is a photograph typed in there with a Vespa or some kind of motorbikes. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, if you don't know, I don't know.
I don't think it's actually a Vespa, but it's one of those type of not full motorcycle. So, of course, winking at the fact that that's how Fassbender or Martian has created this whole I have a missing bike. In reverse image search finds this bike at auction on eBay. There are multiple people bidding on it. By the time they find this listing, it is at $140,000 and it goes well over $1 million. I was thinking, just like, could you imagine somebody who's actually tracking this? Like, it's one of those things that goes viral on the internet where they're like, why is this Vespa going for $1 million?
And this to me was the first bit of like really needing to focus. They're talking about, how are we going to figure this out, how to bid on it, right? And then I guess you do like a reverse image search and find it on an auction site. So that was interesting to me. Spycraft. Right?
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's quite a few bits here of spycraft, an old school spycraft. They actually call this out. It's a little hand wavy, but the way they identify this guy is like, it's got to be old school KGB. Interestingly, Bosco at first does not want to play ball here. He's like, we're not going to play this game with some kind of agency where we don't even know if they have them, or maybe some kind of national organization. And he's afraid of escalating things by acknowledging it and that there's risk involved. And he's willing to just go back to CIA and just say, look, like, they have him and, this is like, we need to escalate things, officially. But Martian's like, no, I don't think so. They would come straight at us. Who would this be? This has to be like somebody who's old school. But he thinks about the different people who arrived, the Belarusians recently, and they narrow it down to this guy we saw very, very briefly, just for like 1 minute in that episode. His name is Moscovich. So he says, no, like we should play ball, we should play along. And I did find it very interesting that Martian's plan here is make the bid, make a big bid, and they won't take the bait. They won't take the money, basically, which is a big risk considering that wasn't he like complaining about $100,000 to get people to get Coyote out of.
I'm not even sure if it was 100,000. I think it might have been 50.
And he's just like, sure, $1,000,000, no problem. I guess it's because he really trusts that Martian says that, well, he's not going to take it. It'll raise too many alarms. Potentially, imagine somebody who's connected to the Russian secret services, and all of a sudden he's got $1,000,000 in his bank account, which is probably being monitored. It would be suspicious to say the least. So he's like saying, let's play chicken with this guy. We'll be able to test our hypothesis. All of this is pretty hand wavy. And the way they suspect it's this guy are, monitoring his phone. He gets a call from his accountant conveniently. Immediately, the accountant calls him up. Hey, there's $1,000,000 in your bank account today, which is like all very convenient. They just happen to be listening in at the time. And then it gets even more bizarre where Fassbender gets to do one of his accents and pretend to be his oncologist.
Oncologist, yes.
Right? And then he calls him up. And then, of course, whoever this operative is, this Moscovich guy, is smart enough to figure out what's going on, calls his oncologist, says, I'll be there next week. And he's like, I don't have any room. I don't have any time to see you. And, all this, presuming that he's being snooped on. And of course, this is how they make their meet arrangement. Is this where you were confused?
No, actually.
Oh, good. Okay. So that was confusing to me, by the way.
Well, you know what? Not the oncologist part. The part that was confusing to me was the part that you referred to as hand wavy, where they're kind of trying to figure out who could be at the bottom of this. And yeah, I felt like I wanted a little bit more of an explanation there.
Yeah, they talk it through in like 30 seconds. They're like, it's not a national organization. They would come directly at us. It has to be one of these people who was those Belarusians that showed up. I think it's this guy. Like, it's a lot of just,
that's the part I rewound.
And they were right away. It's just that, they didn't even have to try 3 different people.
Right.
Like, it could be this guy or that guy. No, it's this guy because he's,
something about an accent too, right? Was it play?
Maybe something. Yeah, that's right. Because they did hear him on the phone. There was a phone number. I forgot to bring that up. There was a phone number on that. So they did speak to somebody. Yeah. I mean, you would think that they might have some kind of voice recognition software, but I guess if this guy's not a big shot, they probably won't have audio recordings of him. Recent ones anyway. They definitely have old ones of him, right? We'll find that out later on. Meanwhile, Hugh Bonneville, I knew this guy was going to come back. He's back from Peru with Paddington, and now we know how Paddington affords that. I know you haven't seen those movies, but they had this big, beautiful house in the middle of London that they live in. Now we know how they afford it. By the way, this character whose name I don't even know, this is a pretty dick move on his part. He, gets this information from Martian just last week, Brandon, as he calls him, Brandon, and shows up at the CIA office and being like, this is what the chatter I've heard. Martian's like, who's in there right now? What the hell's going on here?
And I think I also felt, what the hell's going on here? Second point of confusion for me this episode.
Honestly, I don't understand what his move is here. I feel like this is just setting things up in the same way that when Hugh Bonneville was cast as this character last week and they talked on the patio for like a minute, I'm like, this guy's definitely coming back. You don't hire this guy. And then he, is only going to be in one scene of the show.
It's a distraction technique, right? Is the end conclusion is that he came to talk about one thing because really there's something else going on.
Yeah. And the other part of it too, of course, is that this whole thing, as we've mentioned before, that this is very shady for the CIA to be having such a big operation headquartered out within MI5 or MI6, whatever branch they're working within, basically cutting them out of this. So I think that's all going to come to a head, later in this season or maybe next season, something like that. Obviously, this would blow back badly on the UK as well. But it is a betrayal to Brandon's / Martian's confidence there. I did like some of the dialogue here. I found it very funny. First of all, I love this room. This is such a cool room.
The walls, right? With the angles. Yeah.
Yeah. They when it closes up into a circle, it's like basically like soundproof, and then it like opens up, and then it's you can step out of it, and it's basically like an open space again. It's pretty cool. But I love when they were talking about how they have to meet in the crisis room after the Bonneville character leaves, and he says, "Oh, we don't have a crisis room. We try to avoid those."
Yes. And the little running joke about the Americans adopting British language, right?
Right.
I won't say mate if you don't
Right.
say mate, and I won't say, I can't remember what the rest of the sentence was.
Because Brandon uses one on him to start with. So he's like, just spare me all the other UK
Yes.
euphemisms. One ding on this episode, and maybe the only thing I would complain about, although it is a fun scene, we spend very little time with Danny. She's
Yeah.
being trained by Naomi and laying things out. We still haven't gotten anywhere near this Iran mission. I don't know if it's going to pay off this season. This might be planting seeds for the future once again, given the legacy of this series. Interesting, right? That she's not going to be able to smuggle in a gun, or guns are not the type of thing that's very easy to access in Iran. So they're basically showing her common weapons she might encounter, because inevitably she's going to have to acquire one, probably off the street in some way, right? So they're just introducing her to common guns she might encounter there. So it's setting things up, just kind of the context for her eventual mission. But more importantly here, how do you read these scenes? She's talking about being in this relationship with this guy, the guy who was tormenting her in last week's episode. And Naomi is saying, don't get involved. And she's pushing back, going, did he talk about me? And she's like, I'm not doing this high school thing. I'm not into him. Did he say he was into me? How did you read this? Did you read this purely as Danny is busting Naomi's chops? Or do you see this as another indication that maybe she's not ready for this mission?
I took it at face value at the time, and I felt like I had overestimated Danny then, because I thought her having sex with this guy was kind of just pent up energy. But here, right, it seems very high schoolish, like you said. But now that you are suggesting that maybe she's playing a little game with Naomi, I like that idea better, because it makes a lot more sense to me for a grown woman.
Right.
than how she was actually acting if it were sincere. So I hope that's the case, because it doesn't really add up to me otherwise.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I did write this question down as to, is this just showing how unprofessional she is? But when I rewatched it right now to take notes, she says, I'm just there. It's just the physical thing. I'm just having fun. And then this is literally after Naomi says, I'm not passing notes back and forth in high school. She turns to her and she goes, did he say something else? And the way she has like this smirk on her face, it seems like she's busting Naomi's chops. And then Naomi is also smirking back at her when she goes, see, this is the type of thing, And so it feels like they are playing a little game with each other, which was very cute the second time I watched it. But I didn't read it that way the first time, to be honest. I read it as, if she's legitimately behaving this way and she's being sincere, then she's not ready for what she's going to have to face.
Yes. And it adds up at least that Naomi is having this conversation, because, that's one of the themes here, right? Is what entanglements you need to avoid if you're going to do this kind of work. So it makes sense that they would have this discussion. And I like the idea that maybe it was just a little teasing back and forth. And I hope that's what it was.
Yeah. And I also wonder that even though she's playing it off, her just smirking, I do wonder if, because that's thematically linked to the rest of these characters here, whether it truly is or not. They're playing with both things simultaneously. But I think in that moment when she keeps pushing Naomi on it and Naomi keeps pushing back at her, I think they are playing a little game between themselves there. So meanwhile, back with Samia, she's trying to go shopping supposedly, but she actually wants to go see Paul. It's so confusing to have all these different names for this character. And this Chinese agent is at her door. He's saying, I canceled that Uber for you. Don't worry about it. I'll escort you around. And she's like, I'm fine. Why do I have to be escorted around? And he's basically saying, like, I'm trying to protect you from these other people who might be wanting to do you harm. And she goes, so you are here to protect me from my protection? And this is when, Osman's right-hand man shows up wearing the jacket.
The jacket.
And she, like everyone in America, is going, where'd you get that jacket? I did a reverse image search. I couldn't find it. So he shows up in the jacket just to rub a little salt in the wound and makes fun of the guy, saying, like, I kicked his ass. You need to find yourself a real man. But of course, she's worried now. She's worried about Paul, to say the least.
Unfortunately, I find myself getting a little bit bored with Samia at this point.
I know.
And I think at this point, I thought, I wish I was seeing the brother-in-law. So,
well, we'll get to that. I think you might be seeing him soon.
This is fine. I understand that this is moving things forward in a way, but meh for me.
Yeah, she is one of the least successful parts of this story for sure, unfortunately. And we'll get back to her later in this episode. And I do think there's an issue here with the show where the central mystery, when Fassbender's on the screen, and especially when they start putting the screws to him, it is really compelling. And then trying to have these multiple damsels in distress in characters that are not very well defined is more tricky. I think we'll get to it, but I think what's happening between him and his daughter, which obviously just naturally is more believable. And once again, I just think that the chemistry between him and her is very good, is very believable as a father and daughter, an estranged father and daughter, and is a little more problematic when we're trying to believe that this guy is going to risk everything, potentially like national security for this woman. You know, we've seen them have sex once, I think, total. A lot of the rest of the time is him not trusting her, anything she says. It's very hard to believe that this thing is this love of a lifetime. And then, of course, we get very little character development for her because by definition, the show has to make her this potential femme fatale. So we can't know what's happening inside her head. Although I do have a question. We do have to circle back because I got to see where you're landing on this. And I think I've made up my mind on her.
I think she came up with another monochromatic outfit this week. So that was impressive.
It's red again, right? I think it's red.
No, there was some, she may have also worn red, but there was a blue color as well.
Oh yeah. Yes. I think she's wearing red at the end. I might have confused the two, but yes, there's a blue outfit.
It just makes me think of all the articles as in women's magazines about how to pack efficiently. And it's usually like rely on 2 or 3 basic colors so everything matches with everything. And I think, wow, she must have had a lot of luggage.
Did you see the size of that hotel room, by the way? She has plenty of room to put that clothes away. That's for sure.
It is a beautiful room.
She's like in the 3rd or 4th room of her hotel room. And she should, betray her country just for that. Martian's back at his hotel room that night. Did you notice the distress wall that I mentioned last time? Did you notice it this time?
I did notice it this time, yes.
It's so weird. It's like as if they didn't finish a wall intentionally, but it's a weird design.
It is unusual.
And he has a little camera, I guess, in his room, and he sees that the Chinese agents have been there pursuing him. This is once again speaking to the fact that this guy is really doing a bad job from a national security standpoint. When you think about the fact that he could potentially compromise this incredibly and more so dangerous core mission that he's on, and potentially infiltrating yet another international incident with his connection to Samia, and potentially be compromising both of these things simultaneously. And he's not letting anyone know that he literally has these Chinese agents in his room. He is being pursued by Osman, has been identified by Osman. And of course, there's a personal stakes here as well as things get even more escalated here. But the fact that he at this point has Chinese agents checking his room for bugs and he doesn't tell anybody, like, this is crazy. Really crazy.
Yes, he really has decided to do his own thing. And that kind of comes full circle at the end of the episode too, right? He's making his own decision.
He talks about this right at the end, that voiceover. He says that there's no way out, and he just keeps doubling down, which once again, the biggest mystery I have here, presuming that he is going to be central to the plot in subsequent seasons. When this all comes to light, this guy should get fired ASAP. I would fire this guy as quickly as possible. He's very dangerous. He does talk to Samia there, and they have a little moment there where she hears him laugh, and there's a little tender moment there. But once again, not enough for me to buy into this whole relationship between them, to be honest.
Yeah, even the I miss your laugh, I was kind of like, that wasn't really a laugh so much as maybe a chuckle, but okay.
The next morning, we do see a little bit. We had questions last week about how can he just disappear into the city. We do see an instance of it here right now where he goes to visit his publisher, which of course is his cover story. And then very cool, he calls grandma or grandpa, I forget which one of these agents it is. They're in a truck nearby, in a garbage truck nearby. And the truck pulls up, he jumps into the car and disappears. And I guess they just call when they suspect they might be being tailed. They use these alternate routes to move from one place to another. So that was pretty cool to see it in action. Mm-hmm. But of course, the fact that he has shaked this tail and he shakes them off multiple times here, it makes it incredibly suspicious. Going back to that idea that at this point, he is announcing to the Chinese that he knows that he's being pursued. Mm-hmm. He is not Joe Schmo. If he can shake these tails off multiple times, he really needs to tell somebody what's going on. At least Henry. At least Henry. Oh, this was an interesting moment here, too. Did you notice right after that scene, he calls into the office and he announces that he's going to go black. And then he puts his phone, his official phone, into like a black bag, like one of those bags that kills the cell service. But it's interesting that he announces that he's going to go black. I guess he has to. It's weird that they give him this option, right? Because this is probably when he's doing all these really bad decisions.
I hadn't thought about it, but I suppose
They should like not allow that at all.
yeah,
you
lost
never
your
go black ever.
privileges.
So that, like, for example, when I put that phone away and then all of a sudden that's when I get abducted, you'll never find me again.
Right.
That's a problem. You want to at least know where I was at the time of my abduction. And simultaneously, he is heading back to the office, but this is when the suspense starts to build up. We see that Osman has returned Poppy's student card. Oh, by the way, one of the listeners reached out to us and mentioned the fact that this is a strange thing for him to comply with, considering he's just trying to get a student discount on something that she requested. But yes, when they were together in the previous episode, he was using her student card to buy something for her that she had requested at a student discount. But A, he should have remembered that card was in there. And B, he shouldn't have been carrying it no matter what. Even the student discount is not worth endangering the life of your child.
What is it, 15%? I mean, at most?
It's exactly. Which speaks to the fact that I think he's just so cavalier about these things. I honestly do not think he should be an agent.
But really, thank you to the viewer that pointed it out.
Yes, we were scratching our heads last week.
Viewer, listener. Thank you to the listener.
Yes. They might have been staring at the screen the whole time. Just wasn't that much to see. So she gets really freaked out. She does the wrong thing inadvertently when brings up the Paul Lewis name. She says, I've never heard that name, when actually, if she'd been like, yeah, that's my dad, it may have actually helped. But of course, he has not trained her or prepared for any of this. Once again, is endangering these people just by assuming that there is going to be no price to pay for any of his actions, which is insane. It's absolutely insane, especially as things continue to escalate. And simultaneously, he hears from her. He's panicking. He's calling her an Uber. The Chinese are on his tail. Apparently, they have some kind of tracker on him. He identifies it finally, dumps it into another taxi. It's insane. Now he's basically being pursued by the Chinese and the Sudanese at the same time. And still not informing anybody of what's happened. All of this makes him late for his meeting with Moscovich, who turns out to be indeed the person they were looking for. I like that he's like a sweaty mess when he gets there finally. They've been waiting at least an extra 15, 20 minutes for him to arrive. He likes him when he shows up. He goes, you're sweating. Yeah, I had to run here. I was late. So, which I guess helps to sell that this was an urgent meeting.
Yes, I love the urgency.
I love the urgency, exactly. I like someone who's fast too. He likes that. He doesn't know how fast he ran. He just knows that he was sweating.
Yes.
He could just have terrible cardio. Who knows? I did love this whole sequence, by the way. I like some of the spycraft here. I love when he, for example, turns the corner and he knows that the Chinese agents are there. So he casually turns the corner, and the second he disappears from their view, he sprints to the next corner and then ducks into one of those side alleys and then starts to take off his jacket and look for the tracking device. And all of that was like very, very cool. Yeah. And I like the fact that the agents also do the same thing where they're like casually following him. They turn the corner and he's disappeared, and then they go into panic mode as well. But
I mean, this was also a bit of confusion for me, not major confusion, but I didn't know, since he had disappeared, how did they know which direction to run?
Right. But then they call into the car, right? And they're tracking him.
Yes, they do. But they seemed like they were running towards something, like they knew which way to go. And so then I found that confusing as to how they knew which direction to run if they had no idea where he'd gone.
I think they were just running to the next corner because that would be the only way he could turn at that moment. Although he does, I think after the second corner, at that point, I think when there's more options, that's when they actually call in and say, we need to know his location.
The whole purported car chase was very well done and tense.
Yes. And then when they finally do catch up with them, they do that whole fake out thing, which they do in every movie,
right? Where
it's like he's in the cab, they're pulling up to the corner, they approach the cab, and of course we know he's in a different cab. There's no surprise about that at all. It's a cliche at this point, but regardless, it was well done.
I wondered a couple times.
Earlier on, I do think like, how's he going to make this meeting? He's going to, or is the meeting not going to happen? But then when we got right up to it, we're like, well, no, he's not in that cab. And of course, then he does meet up with Moscovich. He proves that they have Coyote. He's leaked everything. Coyote's leaked every piece of information he has, apparently. His, identity. Apparently, that's a big deal. When Henry hears that, he knows that's like the last thing he would give up. We also find out, like, solving one mystery all the way in episode 1. We're like, what is going on? Was he drunk for real? Was he trying to draw attention to himself because he knew he was going to be abducted by the KGB? Turns out, no, they actually drugged him. They got to his therapist. They messed with his medication. He basically was acting drunk, but it was actually he had just been drugged. As he had warned everybody, if you see me behaving that way, something's gone wrong. We find out how he escaped from the building. They took him into like an underground tunnel, which connects the Russian, basically tunnels that connect the Russian official buildings, took him from one to the other. They worry that he's with abducted by Russians, but they realize that it's actually with this mercenary force who basically works for the Russians, but probably just works for the highest bidder. So there's a little shred of light there. And the goal here, apparently, it's crystallized when they're talking to Langley towards the end of the episode. They presume here that the idea is to make a big deal about saying that here's this American agent behind Russian lines, and they're going to use this as some kind of leverage. They don't know how, but to embarrass America, to escalate the war, to pressure America into exiting the Ukrainian war there. So they're not sure exactly what it is. All they know is that it would be really bad if he actually becomes this public symbol of America's involvement here in the Ukrainian war.
This is maybe the third time in the episode that I rewound. Although all of it did make sense, it just seemed really important. So I wanted to make sure I had absorbed everything that was being explained.
They don't give a crystal clear explanation as to what might be the agenda for abducting Coyote, other than like it would just be bad, right? Like, if he potentially is some higher up, they even say maybe he'll meet the president at one point. So they're talking about like maybe even Putin would use him as some kind of public symbol. So now we know more or less what the goal here is. Interestingly, Moscovich does not want money. He wants a recording from 1989, right before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And he gets wistful here, talking to Martian, telling him that if he's good at his job, if he's actually good at his job, that everything he cares about, he's going to lose eventually, which is, bitter pill when you consider that, right? Like that if you're bad at your job, maybe these people survive. But if you're actually good at it, the message, he listens to that interview where it's like a younger version of himself, right? And they're talking about his wife having been murdered here.
Yeah.
Or that's what we infer here. He obviously gets emotional when he hears that. And of course, worse than that is he's trying to figure out where her body might be, which he doesn't even get from this recording after all this. He does also like take some digs at the UK. He's like looking out the window going, this country used to be a proper country. There used to be combination Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. I'm trying to think about what other memes they have about that. We used to have the McRib.
A Shamrock Shake.
Yes, we used to be a proper country. Yeah, so all of this was like, despite joking about it, that all this was actually pretty upsetting, right? And maybe foreshadowing when you think about the next scene is we do catch up with Samia again. So is this all some kind of foreshadowing to, a catastrophe coming?
I mean, I actually was thinking about it more in connection with his daughter, Given.
Well, that would be even worse. Yes, I agree.
But sure, it could work either way or both. Why not both?
Why not both? Exactly.
Why not lose everybody you love?
Yeah. I mean, that's literally what he's warning of, right? So
yeah.
I also do find it funny that he says, if you're good at your job, potentially face the consequences. And I was thinking, don't worry, he's not good at his job. Yes. So then we meet up with Samia again. She gets rid of Osman's, I still know this guy's name, the other bodyguard.
The one wearing the jacket. Yeah.
The one wearing the jacket, exactly. Where do you think you land now on the whole, whether she's some kind of agent or not? I feel like no, because she does have enough survival skills to get away from this guy, to have done we saw her back in Ethiopia and potentially running away from the militias there. So maybe he's trained her a little bit to know where her exits are because she knows that there's an exit near that bathroom, for example. So all of that would indicate that, well, maybe she's trained in some way. But the fact that she goes to Paul's apartment and is like, Paul, where are you? Where are you? And then sits on his bed and then walks out the door. And then when Osman shows up, she is shocked that he knows where Paul lives. None of this makes her look like she is some kind of operative.
That's a fair point. I wasn't thinking about it in the moment, but that's true. Although she could also be quite bad at her job. But yes.
She could just be inept. That's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, but
Or
just the
just
fact that I
overconfident in her own skills. I don't know. But I think all in all, I would come to the same conclusion as you, that maybe she's involved in something, but not at a very deep level.
I just feel that if she knew that her cover was blown, let's say, for example, or his cover was blown, and she knew more than she apparently does about like Paul's true identity, let's say, for example, for her to go directly, like
Right.
to escape who's pursuing her and go directly to where he is hiding out, not his actual location. Let's say
Right.
she had figured that out, but the hotel where they meet regularly.
Right.
And then when he doesn't answer, like literally as I'm watching the show, I was thinking she's going to get out of there ASAP. But instead she sits on the bed like, I don't know what to do next. It's like that.
Yeah.
That's not, she's not a pro. Not what you would do. If you're an agent and you're like, I think his cover's blown, you would try to go underground ASAP. You wouldn't just sit there and wait for to be picked up by the Chinese or whoever shows up at the door. So it just makes me feel like she is not fully aware of how over her head she is. Or maybe she knows that she's in danger. She doesn't realize that the full Paul situation. Although, as we've said multiple times here, she should be way more suspicious about him. But, she's cheating on her husband. We have said this as well. She's cheating on her husband.
But they're getting divorced.
They are getting divorced. But then also she might say, does he also have perhaps a wife in town or something like that? And he's hiding this from her. If I was her, I'd be like, you got to tell me what's going on here. Even if he has to come up with some cover story, like, all this shadiness does not make any sense. Still a little ambiguous as to what her true role is here, but she does not seem like she's an operative at this point. And then as we get to the very end of the episode, Martian finally gets in touch with his daughter. He's like, are you safe? Are you safe? She's like, yes. He had called her an Uber, told her to double check the ID on the plates. Obviously, very good advice.
For anyone, really.
For anybody, exactly. Absolutely. Especially in this circumstance, right, where someone could just pretend to be an Uber driver and scoop her up. Oh, and then, of course, he's like, are you home? Obviously panicked about all these things. And she's like, what's going on? And he's just like, it's nothing. It's nothing. I'm like, it is obviously not nothing. Even she can clearly see that. And of course, this is eating away at him. And now they're having this war room discussion about what are they going to do about the Coyote situation. And he is completely lost in thought, I'm sure, thinking about Poppy, ignoring the calls from Samia, not even aware of how bad that whole circumstance is at this moment. And he's still really, I think, feeling the full stress of this. And how does he react? Once again, this guy has got to get fired. I got to tell you, his reaction is to tell Langley that they got this all under control. This is actually great for them because, now they know where he is. He's not under Russian control yet. They still have days to make this happen. Langley's like, and you have a plan to do this? And he turns to Bosco and says, Bosco, we got this all under control, right? And Bosco, of course, gets pressured into saying yes, because he doesn't want to sound like they don't have a plan. And I love this when they hang up the phone. Richard Gere, playing Bosco, says to him, did you ever hear about under promising and over delivering? We got it under control. No problem here at all. They have absolutely no plan here, by the way. And this is him just doubling down on a bad bet over and over again. And yeah, everything's coming to a head here. And as we mentioned before, we hear in that voiceover that Martian's saying that he had no plan. Everything was falling apart. And the only thing he could do was keep doubling down and hoping that it just would all work out. And once again, we've talked about before, if this is some kind of commentary on how these organizations are being run and how our national security oftentimes are being run by people just making gut checks and trying to get out of one situation and falling into a worse situation. I think there is some commentary about that. And we see it fully happening here over the course of this season of TV. Yeah, and I thought this was really stressful for sure. I was very stressed out here at the end of the episode.
Yes. Yeah. What are you most stressed out about?
It's really Martian's situation and how it's all culminating. I'm worried, obviously, that these damsels in distress are at risk, but also that, there is this mission that could escalate in some significant way. He's going to have to be revealed at some point that he's been making some terrible decisions. So all of this is really making me sweat because there's just so many shoes that could potentially drop. It really seems like he is going to have to make some devil's bargain at the end where to save this mission, and to rescue Coyote, which of course has the highest stakes ever, something is going to have to give in his personal life. And I doubt that's going to be Poppy. So I'm pretty sure that we're seeing Sammy is going to be the sacrificial lamb here. That's my guess, if I have to guess. So you have any speculation for next week? I am pretty certain that we are going to see your favorite fake doctor.
I hope so. I hope he's doing well.
Well, I mean, we have this very conveniently. We're like, well, he's behind enemy lines. He's in the Ukraine. They're transporting him to Russia. And it's like, well, who do we know who's behind enemy lines in the Ukraine? Dr. Charlie Remy. So
Charlie.
We may see Charlie again. I have a feeling we're definitely going to see Charlie again, maybe in the next episode. And by the way, speaking of people being at risk, there's no guarantee that Charlie, that could be like the sacrificial lamb here. This mission behind enemy lines with the escalation of a potentially nuclear war, between the U.S. and Russia is on the line here too, and Charlie could be in trouble, right? That's not going to be an easy mission for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other speculation for next week?
Not speculation, but I am very worried for Poppy. And I did think this actress did a great job in this episode. She wasn't in it all that much, but where she was interacting with Osman, I thought it was really well done, that she was extremely stressed out and trying to cover it up.
Yes, absolutely.
And I really felt for her and her situation. Yeah. So for a character that we haven't spent all that much time with, I was impressed with this actress.
Yeah, I think she's very good. And to your point, I think everybody, because she's a younger person as well, we worry. And because she's an innocent to this game in general, it'd be terrible if she's the one who takes the brunt of this. But yeah, I agree with the performance as well. You just buy the chemistry between the father and daughter right away. You feel the panic for him when she's at risk. I think all of it is working really well. Hopefully nothing bad happens to her. I have a feeling that if anyone's going to, especially if this show is going to be ongoing,
she's a good character in the future, to keep around.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe in the future she'll be at risk again. And of course that would always be a big motivator for him. But yeah, I don't think you get rid of her in season 1. That's for sure.
Do you think that Danny's mission is going to tie together with all of this? It must, right?
I can't imagine. I honestly was going to talk about that. I think this is very much like the French show that it's based on. It was a show that is to an extent a workplace show over the course of multiple,
like the B plot. For now.
Right. Over the course of seasons, this is what I've heard about the French show itself. Characters that are secondary at the beginning become the central character. And then Martian, for example, this Martian character will be the handler in the background, and different people pop to the top of the call list from season to season. And also a thing I've heard about the original show, it's very much in the mode of The Wire, which also did what I just described before, but also in the fact that, like The Wire, it culminates the A plot culminates in the penultimate episode. And then the last episode kind of
launches the next,
resets the table stakes, and then you get ready for the next season.
Interesting.
And so I think what's going to probably happen is that Danny might have to be called into action, like just to give her some more screen time, pull her off the Iran story and bring her into some thing that's happening in the end game of this particular storyline. So maybe she gets more screen time that way. But then all the seasons they've been planning about the Iranian infiltration, maybe she's on a plane to Iran by the end of the season, and that begins the plot for season 2, or teases it. That's my guess as to what we're going to see.
Yeah, I can't imagine that how suddenly they could be tied together. But then I felt like, well, why are we spending all this time here then? And not all this time, but why are we spending this time here if it's not going to tie together? But
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, that would be my guess. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets tied into this storyline, because they need her on a mission, and then she can become another person that's potentially underqualified for the situation she's in. But I think she's going to become a much more prevalent part of this season, because what would they do now? It would be one of those cheesy spy show things where this completely unrelated story, it's like, it's actually the Iranians that are doing everything. Good thing she's connected to that guy, and then she abducts him and gets some piece of information from him, which does happen in spy shows. But that's like so convenient to be like, he just happened to be tied into the main storyline. It's way too late to make that connection at this point, I think. So I don't think it's going to be like that. I think it's more setting things up for the future. and introducing us to Danny in general, because I think she's probably going to be more important as the show progresses. So yeah, we got 4 more episodes, and it's an exciting time for the podcast, by the way. So obviously, we'll have episode 7 and episode 8 in the next 2 weeks. And then, Sona, I don't even know how we're going to cover this on the podcast, because the same day that we get to the penultimate episode, which might be the most eventful episode of this entire series, is the same day that the Severance season 2 premieres. It's crazy. I don't know how I'm even going to publish them. Maybe put them out like in subsequent days or on the same day, or I don't even know. I don't even know how we're going to do it. But we'll
clear your calendar.
Speaking of which, I republished one of our conversations about season 1 of Severance, and I put it out on Christmas Eve, I think, Sona, because I don't know if you saw this, but Apple gave everybody a little Christmas present. They premiered the first 8 minutes of season 2.
That I haven't watched it yet. I did hear that.
Yeah, I broke it down, and also the trailer, and put that out. So anybody who hasn't seen that was the previous episode to this one. Very much looking forward to that. I'm very curious to see how many people have actually watched those first 8 minutes, which were really interesting. I mean, not that much happens in there, honestly. It does answer a few mysteries connecting season 1 to season 2. But it mostly stuff that they already teased in the trailer, to be honest. Most of the footage that you see in the trailer, I'd say more than half of what you see in the trailer is actually in those first 8 minutes. So it kind of sets things up. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. I also watched the Squid Game season 2, which was a strange viewing experience, I have to say. I'm not sure that show needed a second season. I've been skeptical of it. It ends on a cliffhanger, which is an interesting choice, although we won't have to wait a long time because they shot season 2 and 3 together. Honestly,
I see.
It's like a half season. It's not like a full season.
Gotcha.
And but it is going to premiere this year. So for anybody out there, and I hear many negative things about people frustrated by that cliffhanger ending, and they're like, now I got to wait another 3 years. It's like, no, it's actually shot already. And I'm sure like probably in the summer or maybe the fall, because they have the Stranger Things finale coming in the summer. So maybe in the fall, we'll get that 3rd season, but it's already complete. So you will not have to wait a long time for that. But what I would tell people, probably, honestly, this is a strange thing to say, or maybe not so strange. I would tell people, don't even watch season 2 until season 3 is available, because the reaction has been pretty negative about that cliffhanger. I'm like, maybe it's better without the cliffhanger. And you won't have to wait 5 years for that next season. It's, right around the corner, comparatively, I should say.
Right.
So, but you haven't seen any of season 1, have you?
I need to, but I haven't.
Yeah, I would recommend season 1 is very good. The emotional stakes in season 1 are so powerful that you are putting these people into this situation. It's like watching a reality show, but where the stakes are so much higher, where you get to really fall in love with these characters, knowing that things are going to go badly for them. It's inevitable, right? So there's something really compelling about that. That show is such a phenomenon. The most popular show in the history of the world, basically.
Wow.
Netflix just announced last week that the show's jumped back into the top 10 recently because of the 2nd season coming along. And they announced that 330 million people around the world had completed the series in the past 3 years, which is by far the most popular thing that's ever been broadcast. I can't imagine this thing's going to kind of be the lightning in the bottle that 1st season was. But hey, even if it gets half the audience, it would still be one of the most popular shows of all time. So of course they're going to make it. But yeah, not as good as season 1. There is some very clever plot twists in season 2. But the thing that worked so brilliantly was not only the discovery of these games in season 1 and the stakes, obviously extremely high stakes, but it was not knowing what's going to happen, hoping that things can somehow work out for these characters, even though it's almost certainly going to go badly, given the structure of the game. So a lot of the mystery of it is gone in season 2. And once again, the new characters, there are some recurring characters, but the new characters, we just have no emotional attachment to them. We're just watching it as a spectacle. And that doesn't have the emotional stakes that season 1 had, obviously. So it's a mixed bag. Maybe when everything comes together in season 3, it'll be better. I was pretty mixed on it. And at this point, I'm thinking that the best viewing experience might be just season 1, but we'll see. I mean, we won't have to wait that long to find out with season 3. So we'll see. But yeah, you should watch season 1 when you get a chance, for sure.
Yeah, I really need to.
You're the only one in America and in the world, apparently, who hasn't watched it.
It's just me.
It's just you. I think there's more people who've watched that show than have Netflix subscriptions. So You might be the only person with a current
Funny.
Netflix subscription that hasn't seen that show. Does seem like that. But all right. So, did you have anything that you watched during the holiday break?
No, we have a few movies that are on our list. We were waiting for the Dog Man movie with
Yes.
bated
Soon.
breath. You can
Yeah.
imagine how excited I am about that.
I'm sure you can't wait.
We have talked about Mustafa, but
Yes.
don't seem to be getting any real interest with that one. And have been told Moana 2 is for babies, even though both my husband and I would like to go see it. So that's where we stand. How about you guys?
We didn't see anything either. Charlotte has seen all the Sonic movies, but has somehow not
Oh,
been
yeah,
interested.
Sonic, that is on our list as well.
And she hasn't been interested in seeing this one. She's not interested in seeing the Mustafa movie, although it has picked up steam at the box office after a disappointing opening weekend. Now it looks like it's going to do pretty well, which I wasn't surprised. I figured it would become like a thing to watch during the holidays for families, obviously. We did see Moana. Oh, I saw Wicked, by the way, and I was shocked that I liked Wicked, by the way. I did like
Oh,
it.
really? Good to know.
Have you seen the musical?
I haven't. I have a anti-musical
Yeah.
bias.
Oh no, the reason I was asking, not that I expected you to have seen it. My wife had seen it. I was really surprised that I did like the movie and I did not like the music. I thought the music was pretty boring. So I was surprised. I mean, like I'm
Hmm.
like spoiled, for example, by speaking of Moana, we saw Moana 2. I took my daughter to see it when it first came out, and she was off from school at Thanksgiving. And I fell asleep during it. And
Oh,
I,
really?
I say that as someone who I loved Moana, and this is a big problem there too. The songs in Moana are all bangers. Like those songs get stuck in
Yes.
your head. And there
Hmm.
is one song in the Moana movie, the new one, that is pretty good. And I can't even recall it right now, but in the moment, it's pretty good. All the other ones are completely forgettable. Completely forgettable.
Yeah, I think
And
maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda was not involved with this one.
yes, he was not. That's right. Because
Right.
this was supposed to be a
So,
TV show, and
hmm
they expanded it into a movie, just like you would expect for like a TV series. They kind of repeat the beats from the first movie. All the challenges and all the things are basically the same again. They try to replicate some of the beats of the first film with new characters. The new characters aren't as interesting. The songs aren't as good. It's really just in every way pale imitations of the first film, but it's going to make over $1 billion. And the one positive is that you still like these characters. So I would like to see a proper Moana sequel, which, by the way, this wasn't even supposed to be one. This was supposed to be a TV
right.
series about the side characters.
Hmm.
So it is, there still is an opportunity there for sure. And get Manuel Miranda back to write some of those great songs because there are
Hmm.
no great songs. Your kids are not going to be singing those songs around the house for sure when that becomes available on Disney Plus. So that was pretty disappointing. But Wicked, on the other hand, even though I didn't like the music, I really liked it. I thought the two ladies, Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, are absolutely great together. They're so great together. You buy this friendship between them, and it really makes the whole thing kind of work.
Hmm.
Despite some kind of dodgy special effects here and there, but overall, I really did like it. Yeah, and there's so many things I wanted to see. I still have not seen Nosferatu. I'm trying to see that before break is over. It's turned into a big hit, by the way. It's going to have a $40 million opening weekend, which is shocking to me for such a weird esoteric film. And I also want to see Baby Girl. Speaking of these return of erotic
Hmm.
thrillers, it's been a year of the return of the erotic thriller, and this is one of the highest profile ones. And Nicole Kidman will probably get nominated for Best Actress for this, even though it hasn't done that well to box office. So yeah, lots of stuff to watch right now, and maybe I'll just have a roundup episode where I review a bunch of these things when I finally watch them. All right, Sona, have a great New Year. If I don't
You
talk to
too.
you before then,
Happy New
although
Year.
I'm sure we will talk before then. Any plans? What are your New Year's plans?
A quiet night at home. How about you
Oh,
guys?
nice. We are going to our friends. We always host New Year's. We are going to our friends' party this year. It's casino night. So we are
Fun.
going to
So
have,
fun.
yeah, a casino night, New Year. And yeah, and then on the first, we'll have the family over to just have lunch or something. So
That sounds great.
not too crazy. We'll get to recuperate the next day and then back to work the day after that. So
Hmm.
can't go too crazy. Thanks again for the conversation.
I'll talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.